Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me Team Mosso at the1916company.com for purchase pricing and availability questions concerning this watch. Don't blink or you'll miss it. Externally, there's very little to let you on to the fact that this is the second generation Moser Cie Streamliner Flyback Chrono. In fact, this is the Flyback Chrono 2.0 Funky Blue. So the original Flyback Chrono with Funky Blue dial debuted as the first of the Streamliner series in 2020. A new integrated bracelet sports watch by Moser. It would become part of the backbone of the catalog through various iterations, including everything from simple center seconds to perpetual calendars. But the original Flyback Chronograph left Moser with some unfinished business because Moser and its movement partner Agenor were able to do even better. So for 2023, the version 2.0 of the Streamliner Flyback Chrono Funky Blue bowed, and my goodness, are these changes worthwhile. So let's start with what has not changed. In stainless steel, 42.3 millimeters in diameter, I measure it at 14.5 millimeters thick. It's a solid and robust watch that's otherwise lugless. So if you just look at the case, that doesn't really describe how it wears on the wrist. So I'm going to encourage you to instead move outboard to the first of each of the end link in the bracelet. And now it's 48.2 millimeters. So each end link on each side, if measured horizontally across the wrist, is going to be 48.2. Could you measure more broadly to the edge of the outermost link? Yes, but I don't think that accurately describes how the watch fits. So on my wrist, 16 centimeters in circumference, you can see it's neither thick nor thin, but with a sloped flank, it's actually going to be better with a small cuff than you might think. This will fit underneath a lot of shirts and just about all jackets. Now you can see why I encourage you to just consider the first end link on each side to be the lug-to-lug dimension of this watch. The lugs of the case are nowhere near the edge of my wrist, but also you can see some of these outermost links. They don't really define a rigid outcropping that doesn't curve with the wrist. So again, sub 50 millimeters lug-to-lug, even though this is a 42 plus, I think this watch could wear on a wrist of 14 centimeters circumference. Remember, my wrist is 16, more oval than round and flat across the top. So that's what you're looking at right there. The watch is solid. One of the most distinctive and enjoyable aspects of the Streamliner is that it doesn't look like any one model. I can see like late Speedmaster Mark series, Oris, Chronoris Star, maybe some versions of the Hoyer Autavia. In the bracelet, I can see a little bit of Abel Sport Classic. I can see a little bit of Omega Speed Sonic Lobster Tail Chrono, but I don't look at this and say, oh yeah, that's a Royal Oak, or that's a Nautilus, or that's a Laureato. It channels the spirit of the 70s without plagiarizing the 70s. And that is an example of true greatness in design, when you can pay tribute to your inspirations without duplicating them. But it's not just the aesthetic. The interlink of this bracelet with the intermediate links inside the links, see, they're not external. You can't really see them. But from the top, you realize you're actually looking at a two-layer bracelet where the top links sit in sandwich fashion on top of the intermediate lower links. As a result, you have this wonderfully organic look with no daylight showing. It's almost like you're looking at the chainmail of some sort of undersea predator. It's deeply engrossing, and you can see it has almost an organic wave-like flow to it as you run it over the hand, and it feels that silky on the wrist. This is one of the best built and best decorated and best designed bracelets in the business. And Moser's open about the fact that it works with suppliers for things like clasps and bracelets. You can see Brogioli made this piece, but by speccing great stuff and designing it without compromise, you wind up with a product that feels every cent its price, even if suppliers are brought in, because Moser's a manufacturer and they put their energy into design and movements. When they can't put their energy into a movement that meets their standard, that's when they bring in a caliber partner, which we have in Agenor. And Agenor, by Jean-Marc Wiederrecht, one of the great high horology houses in the business. They've worked with everyone from MB&F to Harry Winston. They built one edition of the Harry Winston Opus series. And Wiederrecht originally launched the Agengraph movement with super high-end customers like Fabergé in mind. And so with Moser, specifications were originally laid out to create a distinctive movement that would fit a Moser case and a Moser chronograph. And later on, it was realized that with all the technical goals met, some aesthetic changes could be made for the second series of the Flyback Chrono alongside mechanical changes. So first, all of this with the screw-down crown is 120 meters water resistant, and that's dynamic, meaning if you want to use the chronograph pushers underwater down to 120 meters, Moser endorses this. Now, not only do we have the 120 meter dynamic water resistance rating, but you can see more obviously Moser distinct cues on the back here. You can see Moser's distinctive double-crested Côte de Genève, the most obvious difference compared to the first generation of the Streamliner Flyback Chrono. We have these nickel anthracite coatings on some of the superstructures. It gives it a much darker and more bespoke look. Also, and most substantively, there have been technical changes. So the original movement's 54-hour power reserve with dual barrels now becomes 72. So a much longer power reserve. It's a 3 Hz beat rate, 55 joules. It's a monstrously complicated movement with hundreds upon hundreds of parts, and it features a unique shock-resistant and slip-resistant sort of adjustment mechanism on the balance. So it's not a free-sprung balance, but in terms of shock resistance and precision of setting, the unique Agenor setting mechanism and adjustment mechanism actually has many of the positive qualities, the resilient qualities of a free-sprung oscillator. Now, what's strange here is I've mentioned it's automatic, but the tungsten rotor sits underneath the dial, so you have this unobstructed view of the spectacular column wheel lateral clutch Agengraph on the back. And so it is a automatic winder that allows you to see and appreciate a movement which Wiederrecht has himself said meets the aesthetic standards to earn the Poisson de Genève. Now, what's also cool is that it features flyback action, but before I do this, let me remind you that we have central register seconds and central register minutes. So it's a little bit like an old Lamagna 5100 in that regard, where you can easily read the minutes outboard on a big scale. Most chronographs give you a 30-minute scale and it's very small. This gives you a 60-minute scale and it's very big. Also fun, flyback action, reset and restart without first stopping. Very important, because you can time 2 events that occur in rapid succession. Now, the watch does have lume. They use this Globalite-style ceramic lume on the dial. And then we've got what would be called in the Omega parlance a racing dial. Seen on some Omega Speedmasters in the late 60s through the 70s, we have this checkered flag-like motif outboard that does look like the checkered flag of a motor race, but also allows you to more easily read fractions of chronoseconds. We also have a dial that is almost unbranded. If you look very closely, you can see H. Moser and Cie in clear lacquer. They started doing this about 2 years ago with the Mega Cool, and the idea being that their design language is strong enough that you don't need to go crazy with branding. They were the first brand to meet the Swiss-made standards, but take it off the dial, because their watches are 90 to 95% Swiss, and of course it's a 60% qualitative standard to label Swiss-made, so Moser does not want to sign it as per the lower standard, so they took it off the dial. And they rightly determined that their design inside and out is so strong that they don't need to put their logo in outwardly visible lacquer, so they make it clear. And that's the easiest way to tell this is the version 2.0 of the watch versus the white lacquer of the original. So lots to love right there. You can see there's an unconventional, dramatically cambered and boxed sapphire here. And we have this very 1970s style radial lapping machine grain. Also worth mentioning, Moser watches generally feature some sort of case band articulation or recess. So here we have the sandwich-like construction with case back bezel and then a sort of recess in between. God is in the details, and Moser out of Schaffhausen, Switzerland, German-speaking watchmaking in Switzerland. They do a great job with that. One last note, there is a column wheel for crisp actuation of the chrono, but then there is this clutch that Jean-Marc Wiederrecht has pioneered that gives you a more seamless engagement. Now, it's a type of lateral clutch that sort of blends features of the vertical and the lateral clutch, where you have a smooth roller responsible for the instant engagement, but then you also have a toothed interaction, so a shock can cause a purely smooth roller lateral clutch system to skip a little bit, but because this is a smooth roller that also features toothed engagement, a shock will not cause the driving wheel and the driven wheel to become desynchronized. So the Chronograph with the clutch, a very cool refinement. This is the best of all possible worlds. Bracelet design, a company you can really believe in with great people behind it, and one of the finest chronograph calibers in the world, certainly one of the most complex. Reach out to Team Mosso at the 1916company.com for purchase and pricing details.